Basic Education Minister Siviwe Gwarube says she's addressing reports of sexual abuse by teachers and disruptions to teaching at Eastern Cape schools. Some of the cases have reportedly resulted in pupils falling pregnant. Let's speak to the minister now, who joins us from Cape Town this evening. Minister, good evening to you. These are very disturbing reports indeed. Your media statement today says 7 educators stand accused of sexual abuse, and this is on the back of several pregnancies at a St. John's College in the Eastern Cape. How many children are we talking about here? Minister, are you there?
Good evening, Claudia, and good evening to your viewers. I'm here.
Yes, apologies. I think you were frozen for a moment there. Please go ahead.
Good evening, Claudia, and good evening to your viewers. I have been in conversation and in discussion with the province, the Eastern Cape, and the MEC, who's been cooperating very well with me over the past several days about these allegations that have emerged, not only from St. John's, if I might add, Claudia, but from 4 other schools in the same region. And what this really points to us is, firstly, that this is not as many people who have flagged this issue with me on social media and everywhere else, that this is not something that is new, but it's something that's systemic, that has been happening over years, and that and teachers have been engaging in this kind of behavior. And I've impressed upon the province that, one, we need not to wait for parents or actually the victims to be the ones who report these matters to the police, and that the province and the government these matters for police taken up the matter. Number 2, Kuli, what is really important, and which is what I welcome, what the province has done, is that 7 suspensions have happened of those who have been accused of these crimes. They've been suspended and removed from schools. But I think what is important, and the last I want to make on this is that it is incredibly important that what happens is that teachers who are accused of such behavior are either dismissed at one school and they pop up in another elsewhere, and they do the same thing. And so if we're able to get successful prosecutions, which is what we need from the South African Police Service, is then what we do then is that, firstly, SACE, the South African Education Council, South African Council of Educators, number 1, blacklists the teacher. Number 2, these perpetrators are then recorded on the Sexual Offenders Register and the Child Protection Register. It then means that they are prevented from finding themselves in any proximity with any children anywhere else. And so this is really one of those things where this is something that is not just unique to the Eastern Cape, but is something that has been dogging our education system for a long time. And so not only just wanting to deal with this matter, but I also want to, and one of the things that I'm wanting to do is, how do we tighten the reporting and the collaboration with SAPS when it comes to sexual offenses?
And that's the very step I'd like for you to talk to, Minister, because, as you say, this goes back many years. It's not just the Eastern Cape implicated. We've had several cases in Gauteng, including other provinces. So what is the best way to handle this? I realize that, on the one hand, this is quite sensitive because these are children, essentially. So you have got to deal with them in a manner or in a safe space where they are able to speak freely.
And really, that's the nub of the issue, right? Because one of the things that officials will say is that to guarantee a successful prosecution, you have to have a victim come forward and essentially detail what has happened. And in many instances, really, the perpetrators of this kind of really heinous violence, what they do is they even reach out to families and convince them to not report these matters. And then it really hinders the South African Police Service's ability to have a successful prosecution. So one of the things that I've been saying to the team at the Department of Basic Education is that we need to have a very holistic way of dealing with this, because this is one, endemic. Secondly, it's systemic, and thirdly, it is very much societal. And so in dealing with it, we can't just deal with it from a punitive measure, but we also have to engage parents to say, parents, unless you get these things reported and you assist us to getting a successful prosecution, some of these educators may be dismissed in one school. Because what may happen, Koli, very well, is that an educator may resign while this investigation is going on. These suspended educators may very well, one of them may resign. And what then happens is that, well, then the case is closed. Then they can rock up in Northwest and do the same thing. So it's so important that we get successful prosecutions, because it's the only way we can protect children going forward. And as you say, I loathe when people talk about relationships between teachers and learners. There's no learner, unless they are much older than 18, there's no learner that is not a minor in a school. And so if a teacher in a position of power is essentially sexually harassing a student, that is abuse. It's statutory rape in many instances.
Yeah.
And so this has to really we have to crack down on this hard, and we also need parents to come on to really come to the party with us on this matter.
Very briefly, Minister, I need to bring in Operation Dudula, but before that, the Sexual Offenders Register, when is that going to be up and running? Because that's the opportunity as well. I don't know whether I'm getting ahead of myself to say this, but that register surely should help in naming and shaming, or am I mistaken?
You're not mistaken at all. So Minister Kubai and I are in discussions with our two departments. Minister Kubai has acknowledged that there has been delays in updating the sexual offenders register, and of course, one of the things and the stumbling blocks that she has encountered is the fact that while she may have wanted to make that sexual offenders register public, there is a change in law that needs to happen. So that's on the one side. And so she's engaged with that process of trying to get the change in law to say, how do employers access easily the sexual offenders register? Do we make it public? Are we able to make it public? And so that is a process that her and her department are engaged in. But her and I are engaged in a process where departments of education in provinces are able to access this. But the big problem here, Koli, is that register is not up to date. And so that is why she's engaged in a process of making sure that register is updated in real time. If any of these educators in the Eastern Cape are found guilty and prosecuted, their names should reflect that as soon as that prosecution is done, as soon as that sentence is handed down, so that we can prevent them from, popping up in another school again. So it is a process that has to happen between the two departments. So we've already begun the work, and I'm really grateful to her for taking up this matter, because I can't keep coming here, Koli, and condemning instances of violence. We have to make sure that people end up behind bars, and we also have to make sure that people don't pop up in other schools doing the same thing.
Let's talk Operation Dudula then. And the question is quite simple. What are you going to do about this situation where people go to schools and literally block children from entering the premises? First of all, how do they know which child belongs where? Because that's the start of this disruption.
Oli, I want to be circumspect as I say this, but I want to be very clear that anybody who disrupts school and who prevents children from getting an education who are children of a school going age is essentially breaking the law. Number one. Number two, I will not tolerate anybody who victimizes children in school. It cannot be that in a country like ours, 31 years into our democracy, we have people who are standing at gates, test on children. That is not how we deal with the issue of illegal immigration. Illegal immigration must be dealt with at a policy level, at a home affairs level. And so, if people are not prepared to do the hard yards of dealing with illegal immigration at that level, and they are taking the law into their own hands, they're breaking into schools, they're interrupting teaching and learning time. I have already engaged with the Minister of Police to say the police must get involved and the police must not hold back in essentially arresting anybody who seeks to disrupt school, but also victimize children. Well, what kind of society are we where there are people who are going to walk into a school who are going to demand to know which child is documented, which child is not, which child is a foreigner, which child is not? The Constitution is clear. Case law is clear, Bully. We have a constitutional court judgment that says any child who's of school going age has to be admitted in the school.
Yeah.
And as a country that it really values our constitution, surely we have to make sure that the rights of a child, regardless of where they come from and who they are, needs to be protected. And that's why I'm unapologetic about simply saying we interrupt teaching and learning time because these are children, these are minors. When we deal with issues of illegal immigration, we do it, but not in schools.
Yeah. Minister, this conversation lends itself in the political realm, basically the political space. Listening to the radio today, a caller says, South Africa is a very nice country where people who are undocumented can just enter here and expect that their children are going to go to schools without being asked any questions. We have a very nice country indeed. How do you respond to that?
I say we have a country that's governed by the Constitution. And I say that we have a hard-won constitution, Koli. We come from a past that is deeply painful, where people could arbitrarily rob people of their rights. The reality is that this is a slippery slope. So you start now and saying that, this is who is a foreigner in a school, who must be here, who must not be here. We can't have that. We've got laws in our country, we've got a constitution in our country. What I'm saying is that I have a legal and fiduciary responsibility to every single child, all 13.5 million of them who are in our schools. And so my duty is to respect the constitution and protect all of them. The broader conversation about how do we deal with illegal immigration in the country has to be dealt with from a policy level, has to be dealt with either from Home Affairs, from police, and from a level where I do not expect anybody who's going to walk into a school and essentially start separating children from each other. That is where we draw the line. Because you can just stage a march, Toli, and go and march against this is in Pretoria. That's fine. You can stage a march against the Gauteng Provincial Department. That's fine. But you walk into a school, you start victimizing children, then you belong in jail. Because you see, the reality is that we have to protect children. And that I'm unapologetic about. And we can have a deeper conversation about illegal immigration, and that's fine. And that's that conversation that the country must have. But the victimization of children is something that South Africa can never, ever, ever really accept. It's completely unconscionable for me. And I think that as any, law-abiding South Africans, we have to frown upon that.
Very briefly. So the question is, what is the plan? Do you intend to rely on the police to make sure that this does not happen? And linked to that, it may sound flippant, Minister, but I don't intend for it to come out this way. Going back to the previous question, someone is going to stand up and say, oh, clearly, South Africa has limitless resources, which means that we can accommodate the whole of the continent and indeed the world. Where do we get these resources from?
Of course, we don't have limitless resources, Toli. I come onto your show many times where we talk about financial constraints. But when we're dealing with issues around financial constraints, we don't then limit or victimize people as a result of it. What we do is we deal with the root causes. I'm saying to you that South Africa needs to have a deeper conversation around illegal immigrant vigilantes walking to a school, demanding to know who's a foreigner and who's not. It's a slippery slope that our constitution cannot allow for. So you ask me, what is the plan? The plan is simply to say the police have an obligation to make sure that those who break the law, which is storming into schools and disrupting teaching and learning time, they have an obligation to make sure that they apply the law and they arrest people who do so. So I'm not separating the conversation around illegal immigration and what needs to happen in our country away from that. But I have to put my responsibility of saying my job is to protect children in accordance to the Children's Act, in accordance to the Constitution. And so we can't have these political debates spilling out into schools. We have to create safety places for schools, Polly. Then let's have a conversation, a deeper conversation, a political conversation about how does South Africa manage its resources in line and in light of illegal immigration in the country. That is a conversation that must be had. But I can't allow that to play itself out in a school because that's where children are. And these people are people who are vulnerable and they expect our protection. So I'm saying to you is that yes, the country does not have limitless resources. In fact, education is one of the most cash-strapped departments in the country, where we are talking about financial constraints in every single province. But that does not justify storming into schools, separating children from one another. We are not those people as a country, and we can't allow ourselves to degenerate into those people. Let's deal with the root causes of illegal immigration without victimizing children.
A worthy conversation indeed, Minister of Basic Education, on the eve of Heritage Day, when we celebrate who we are as a country. Thank you very much indeed, Siviwe Gwarube, talking to us.